Yeah. Good evening, all. Sorry, last week we could have the session of diabetes last week, and got held up in the theater. As scheduled, today we'll have the chronic kidney disease patient for non-renal surgery. The case is moderated by Dr. Prabha. She is a HOD in Ramakrishna Hospital, Coimbatore, and Dr. Muthukumar. He's a senior consultant in anesthetist in Ramakrishna Hospital, Coimbatore. And it will be presented by Dr. Anbumani. And shall we go and start the presentation?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you can continue.
Good evening, one and all. A case discussion on chronic kidney disease patient coming for non-renal surgery. Patient name Mrs. Sumati, 55 years, female. She is a homemaker by occupation, hailing from Ukkadam, Coimbatore. Came with a chief complaints of alleged history of slip and fall with sustained injury to left hip 2 days back. Now presented with history of swelling, pain, and inability to move the left hip. History of presenting illness. Patient was apparently normal 2 days back. Now she presented with history of swelling, pain, and inability to move the left hip. She had fall in her home 2 days back and had sustained injury to the left hip. There was no history of loss of consciousness. She was diagnosed by a physician as chronic kidney disease for evaluation of reduced urine output and puffiness of face and lower limb, and was on medical treatment for past 4 years. Then she was on hemodialysis for past 1 year, twice a week. Last dialysis was done yesterday. She was taking 2 liters of fluid daily initially, now restricted to 1 liter of fluid per day. Patient had good effort tolerance. She was able to climb 2 flights of stairs. No history of decrease in blood pressure, breathing difficulty, itching, or allergic manifestations during hemodialysis. No history of EC fatigability or altered sensorium during hemodialysis. No history of chest pain, palpitations, or syncope. No history of fever or recurrent respiratory tract infections, and no history of constipation or diarrhea. No history of hypoglycemic episodes observed. Drug history, she was on capsule oxytriol 0.25 mg OD, which is calcitriol, vitamin D supplement, injection BPOX 2000 units subcutaneous weekly once, erythropoietin supplementation, and was on tablet Olmesar 20 mg OD, and she was on insulin human mixture 15 units PD. Personal history, sleep was normal, urine output was decreased, and feeling of incomplete evacuation was present. Bowel habits normal, mixed diet. She attained menopause at 48 years of age and no significant family history. Summary, a 55 years old female with known case of type 2 diabetes mellitus for 15 years and was on insulin therapy, and chronic kidney disease for 4 years and was hemodialysis for past 1 year, presenting with fracture of left hip. On general examination, patient was conscious, oriented, and cooperative, moderately built and nourished. Pallor was present, bilateral pitting pedal edema present, no icterus cyanosis clubbing or lymphadenopathy, AV fistula in left forearm, thrill present, and the AV fistula is patterned, no other functioning non-fistulas seen. Height of 158 centimeters, weight of 70 kgs, and dry weight of 63 kgs. BMI was 28 kg per meter square. Airway examination, facies normal, external nares normal, no deviated nasal septum or no polyps, mouth opening more than 3 centimeter, Malambati grade 2, thyromental distance more than 6 centimeter, temporomandibular joint mobile and one finger insinuation possible, neck movements normal. So overall, no anticipated difficult airway. Prayer sign is negative and conference sign grade 0. Vitals, pulse felt in the right radial artery 90 per minute, regular in rhythm, normal in volume and character, felt equally in all peripheral pulses. Condition of the vessel wall normal, no radio or radiofemoral delay. Blood pressure in supine, it was 140 millimeters of mercury and 120 or 60 millimeters of mercury in standing position. Respiratory rate was 16 per minute, regular and abdominothoracic type. Heart rate variability to respiration was normal. Temperature 37.9 degrees Celsius and room air saturation was 97%. And on systemic examination, per abdomen inspection, abdomen is not distended, umbilicus is in midline and flushed with the skin. All quadrants moves equally with respiration, no visible scars, sinuses or distended veins, inguinal orifices free. On palpation, abdomen was soft, non-tender, no guarding or rigidity, no organomegaly. And on percussion, no fluid thrill or no shifting dullness. On auscultation, normal bowel sounds heard. Cardiovascular system, on inspection, trachea is in midline, chest wall appears normal, no visible pulsation seen. On palpation, apical impulse felt in the fifth intercostal space, half an inch lateral to the midclavicular line, no thrill or parasternal heave present. On auscultation, S1, S2 heard in aortic, pulmonary, tricuspid and mitral area, no murmur. Respiratory system, on inspection, trachea is in midline, chest wall appears symmetrical, no scar sinuses or engorged veins. On a palpation, chest expansion equal on both sides, vocal fremitus equal on both sides. On percussion, all lung fields are resonant. And on auscultation, normal vesicular breath sounds over all lung fields, no added sounds. Central nervous system, higher motor functions normal, cranial nerves normal, sensory and motor function normal, no Glovin-Stocking type of peripheral neuropathy seen. Provisional diagnosis, a 55 years old female with a known case of type 2 diabetes mellitus on insulin therapy and chronic kidney disease on regular dialysis, presented with subtrochanteric fracture of the left hip, now posted for proximal femoral nailing of the left hip.
Well done, Anjumani. That's a very nice presentation. And now, how do you say this patient is having a chronic renal disease? What are your history finding and your examination finding? You just come up to say, how do you say it is chronic kidney disease?
Patient had reduced urine output and puffiness of face and pedal edema, and she was on regular dialysis twice a week.
Okay. What is the definition of chronic kidney disease?
Chronic kidney disease is defined as a decline in GFR less than 60 ml per 1.73 meters square caused by any underlying pathology like diabetes, hypertension, glomerulonephritis or polycystic kidney disease, which is present for more than 3 months.
Okay, that means she is having more than 2 years. So one thing. And okay, what are the criteria? How will you how will you stage the chronic kidney disease? What stage she comes under? What are the stages of chronic kidney disease? How will you stage?
Stages of chronic kidney disease based on the GFR. GFR less than 90 ml per minute per 1.73 meters square, stage 1, and stage 2, 60 to 89 ml per minute per 1.73 meters square, and grade 3 is 30 to 59, and grade 4 is 15 to 29, and grade 5 is end stage renal disease with less than 15 ml per minute per meter square, associated with any albuminuria, normal less than 30 mg per gram, mild moderately increased 30 to 300 milligram per gram, and severely impaired more than 300 milligram per gram.
Yeah, so albuminuria should be there. Okay, And what is that GFR means? What is the meaning of GFR?
GFR is glomerular filtration done by all the nephrons of the kidney per minute. Both the kidneys per minute. It is normal is 125 ml per minute.
Okay. So if it is coming down less than 60, it means it's significant.
Yeah,
How do you calculate? How do you calculate GFR? What is the methodology to calculate GFR?
To estimate GFR, we use Cockcroft-Gault formula 140 minus age into weight into 0.85 for female divided by 72 into serum creatinine.
Okay.
Which estimates the GFR.
GFR varies with all ethnic groups and males and females. So it differs between different ethnic groups. Okay.
Yes.
And what are the pathological changes you see in these patients that is concerning anesthesiologists, especially in CKD patients?
CKD patients, in various systems, they undergo changes. First, in CVS, they will have accelerated atherosclerosis due to impaired lipolysis, which can cause hypertension, ischemic heart disease, and they can have valvular metastatic valvular lesions due to hyperphosphatemia and hypocalcemia.
No.
Due
It
to
comes from cardiovascular. It comes from one system, cardiovascular system. What are the changes?
Cardiovascular, systemic hypertension, ischemic heart disease, metastatic valvular calcifications, uremic pericarditis, and uremic cardiomyopathy, pulmonary edema.
Yeah. Then coming to respiratory system.
Respiratory system, they are more prone for atelectasis and decreased surfactant production. So they are more prone for alveolar interstitial edema and more prone for frequent respiratory tract infections also.
Okay.
And in hematology,
tell me.
In hematological, they are more prone for anemia due to decreased erythropoietin production, and then decrease in lifespan of RBC by uremia, and increased chronic upper GI losses due to uremia and dietary iron deficiency. And they are more prone for platelet dysfunction. Qualitative dysfunction of platelets is seen due to impaired release of von Willebrand factor and factor 8. So the adhesiveness and aggregation of the platelet function will be lost.
Okay. Metabolic?
Metabolic, they are more prone for hyponatremia due to altered RAS, renin-angiotensin activation. So they will have sodium and water retention leading to hyponatremia, and abnormal potassium secretion is present in renal patients, more prone for hyperkalemia. And they also have hyperphosphatemia due to impaired elimination of phosphate, and hypocalcemia, hypermagnesemia, and they also have chronic metabolic acidosis due to accumulation of H+ ions and improper buffering regeneration.
And decreased bicarbonate will be there.
And decreased bicarbonate is also seen. In GI, they are more prone for delayed gastric emptying. So they have anorexia, vomiting, nausea, and they can also have autonomic gastroparesis. So more prone for risk of aspiration.
Okay.
In CNS,
CNS?
In CNS, they may have asterixis myoclonus, and due to uremia, they may have uremic encephalopathy, and autonomic neuropathy is more common in CKD patients. And in musculoskeletal, they have muscle weakness, and due to hyperphosphatemia, which induce hypocalcemia, there will be secondary hyperparathyroidism leading to increased osteoclastic and osteoblastic activity of the bone, leading on to osteitis fibrosa cystica. In endocrine, they also have vitamin D deficiency and impaired lipolysis leading to hypertriglyceridemia.
Okay. Coming to anesthetic implications of this system, what you told, how will you, what are the cardiac implications? What is important for anesthetists regarding these cardiac changes in these patients? Like, what will happen to, what is concerning you in these patients regarding the cardiovascular system?
They are more prone for perioperative MI and arrhythmias.
Silent MI and arrhythmias. So one thing. Second thing, for respiratory system, they are more prone for pulmonary edema.
Edema and atelectasis.
And regarding CNS, they have a high potential. They will be potentiated with all your sedation and anesthetics. So they will have all delayed awakening. And regarding this hematological conditions, they are prone for bleeding coagulation, coagulopathy, and they have chances of regional. If you give a regional block, they will have problems of epidural hematomas and other bleeding diathesis will be there. So metabolically, you see, you will have hypokalemia and hyperkalemia. Hyperkalemia is more dangerous in these patients, so you have to be very careful. And gastrointestinal, again, you will have to have
risk of
aspiration, and you have to give anti-aspiration prophylaxis. And you didn't tell about immunological. What is more about immunological?
There will be impact B cell and T cell function, so they are more prone for infections, catheter site infections, IV line infections.
Yeah. And what about your fistula? That is, what is the type of cardiac output they will have in these patients?
They have increased cardiac output due to volume overload status.
High output cardiac. Yeah, the cardiac output will be very high. So how do they compensate? So you told there will be anemia with these patients. How do they compensate for that anemia?
They will have a shift of ODC curve to the right and increase in 2-3 DPG. So improve the tissue oxygenation, and they also have decreased viscosity of the blood and increased cardiac output.
Okay.
So they can maintain the perfusion of other organs with compensating.
Yeah. And you told about autonomic neuropathy. How do you examine this autonomic neuropathy for this patient? How did you examine?
We can examine by asking the patient to lie supine, connecting the patient to the ECG monitor, and I will ask. We can test parasympathetic and sympathetic separately. In parasympathetic, I will ask the patient to have a deep breathing of about 6 breaths per minute, and I will see any rise in heartbeat of more than 15 is normal. And blood pressure while standing from supine, there will be change in blood pressure, diastolic blood pressure of more than 16, and passive tilting of the patient will also have alteration in the blood pressure. And Valsalva maneuver, by asking the patient to exhale for 15 seconds against fixed resistance of 40 mm Hg. There will be phase changes of blood pressure and heart rate in 4 phases will be observed. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4. In the initial phase, due to compression of the aorta, there will be increase in the blood pressure with the reflex bradycardia. In phase 2, decreased cardiac output due to decreased venous return. There will be decrease in the blood pressure with reflex tachycardia. In phase 3, as the expiration stops, the blood pressure will be decreased and heart rate will be remain the same. In phase 4, due to normal venous return and cardiac output, there will be overshooting of the blood pressure. Based on this, we can calculate Valsalva ratio by the longest RR interval by shortest RR interval. It should be more than 1.2.
Okay. And what is your inference from the dialysis? Why do you, how does, why are we bothered about these patients, whether they are dialyzed or not? You are told that she is dialyzed day before yesterday or yesterday. Why are you bothered about this patient coming for surgery?
Dialysis will have anesthetic implications. It should be around 6 hours to 24 hours. If it is less than 6 hours, patient will be volume depleted, more prone for hypotension intra. If it is more than 24 hours, they will be volume loaded state, so more prone for pulmonary edema, volume overload states, and congestive cardiac failure during intra.
What do you think are the indications for dialysis in these patients, like in chronic CKD patients?
GFR less than 15 ml per minute per 1.73 meter square, and then refractory hyperkalemia more than 6 millimoles per liter, chronic metabolic acidosis, and then patient on volume overload state with congestive cardiac failure.
Okay, so that is about dialysis. And how will you manage this patient? Like, if patient comes today and going to be posted tomorrow, what are your pre-anesthetic evaluation that you are going to do?
In the pre-op, I will explain the NPO status for the patient. Investigations, in pre-op investigations, I will ask for a complete blood count to know the baseline HB platelet, and then RFT to know the base urea, serum creat, and the EGFR status of the patient, and random blood sugar since he is a diabetic, and also morning FBS and HbA1c, and coagulation profile, PT, APTT, INR, and chest X-ray to rule out any cardiomegaly, pulmonary edema, and ECG to rule out left ventricular hypertrophy, arrhythmias, and any ischemic heart disease stages, and echo to know the ejection fraction and any regional wall motion abnormalities, valvular abnormalities, um, serology, blood grouping, and then now I will ask for RT-PCR also.
You told about coagulation profile. Will it be normal or will it be altered in these patients?
It will be normal if the patient is on controlled dialysis.
Yes. Usually these patients will have normal bleeding parameters, except for bleeding time that will be prolonged, which we are not routinely doing. And coagulation profiles, PTINR, APTT, and your platelet counts, everything will be normal. The only problem will be your platelet dysfunction. What will be the point of care test to see there is coagulation abnormality in this patient?
Thromboelastography.
Yes. If the thromboelastography has to be done before you have to confirm it. Okay. And okay, then what will you do after doing all the investigations? Hemoglobin comes. What will be the normal hemoglobin for this patient that you can accept for surgery?
6 to 7.
It's more than 7 usually. And what will you do if it is less than 7?
Less than
Will you
7.
transfuse? How will you treat the anemia in this patient? What are the treatment for anemia?
Erythropoietin supplements subcutaneously.
Yeah, this patient is on erythropoietin supplement.
And vitamin D supplement.
Vitamin? Iron and folic acid.
Iron and folic acid, vitamin D.
Okay. And if the patient is having 6 grams, will you transfuse preoperatively? How will you transfuse? What are the indications? What are the precautions, or what are the criteria you will follow to transfuse this patient?
If I want to transfuse, I will use leukocyte reduced irradiated RBCs to avoid sensitization to HLA antigen, which will cause future renal graft rejection.
Yeah. Okay. We told about electrolytes.
Yes.
What are the concerns about electrolytes in this patient?
Hyperkalemia.
What is your goal? What do you
It
expect?
should be less than 5.5 millimoles per liter for surgery.
Okay. If this patient is having 6 millimoles, how will you take it up for surgery?
I will correct hyperkalemia and then take, sir.
So how will you correct hyperkalemia?
10% calcium gluconate 10 ml IV over 10 minutes for membrane stabilizing. And
If there is ECG changes, what are the ECG changes you expect in hyperkalemia?
QRS widening and tall T waves.
Tall T waves, QRS widening, PR interval prolonged, then sine wave, then widened, then sine waves will come at the end. Okay. The last will be ventricular fibrillation. These are the 5 stages of hyperkalemic. And if there is the ECG changes, you give calcium gluconate.
Okay.
Okay. What is the difference between calcium gluconate and calcium chloride? We can't give calcium chloride.
Calcium chloride and calcium 9 grams of calcium in calcium gluconate and 37 grams in calcium chloride. The calcium.
Yeah, that's be 3 times more in calcium chloride. It's highly irritable to the veins.
Yeah, so the peripheral line is not preferred for calcium chloride.
Yes. Okay. Then what else you give for hyperkalemia?
And glucose insulin infusion, insulin of 0.1 units per kg, and soda bicarb 1 milliequivalents per kg, salbutamol nebulization,
Yeah.
diuretic furosemide 20 to 40 mg IV.
If it patient is having urine output.
Yes.
Okay. And last but not least is
dialysis.
Okay. And next coming, will you do ABG for this patient?
In case of emergency surgeries, we can ask for ABG, or any major fluid shift surgeries, we can ask for ABG also.
Yeah. Otherwise also, what do you expect in this patient with ABG?
They will have high anion gap metabolic acidosis.
Yeah. And will you do albumin for this patient, serum albumin?
Yes, sir. Serum albumin. To know
why is it important for us?
They are more prone for hypoalbuminemia, which will increase the free fraction of the drugs.
Yeah. Okay. Then how will you continue with your pre-medication? How will you go about again?
Before that, I will advise the NPO status for the patient, 6 hours for solids and 2 hours for clear liquids. And then I will get a written informed consent from the patient. And on the day of surgery, I will reconfirm the NPO status and informed consent, and I will advise 10 mg metoclopramide IV 1 hour prior to surgery as anti-aspiration prophylaxis.
Okay. What are the drugs that you will continue? The patient is on some drugs you told. What are the drugs you will continue? What are the drugs
I will skip insulin on the day of surgery after getting a fasting blood sugar, and then I will continue all other supplements, and I will also avoid AC inhibitors on the day of surgery.
Why? Why do you want to avoid AC?
They are more prone for intraoperative hypotension patient on AC inhibitors.
Okay. And okay. Now patient has come into the OT. Or what are the monitors you will apply? What are the intraoperative goals you will like to maintain in these patients? How will you maintain the intraoperative period?
Baseline monitors non-invasive blood pressure, pulse oximetry, 5-lead ECG. Pre-induction monitors. Post-induction, I will end-tidal carbon dioxide, temperature, and urine output. And the anesthetic goal is to maintain the renal perfusion by avoiding hypotension, hypovolemia, and hypoxia.
The patient is already on dialysis. What else you are bothered in this patient? How will you manage your fluid in this patient? What are the fluids you will select? And how will you manage?
I will prefer balanced.
What are the monitors? Yes. How are the monitors you will apply to monitor the fluids?
Since they don't have adequate urine output, I can prefer central line for monitoring CVP
Yeah.
to
What will you
maintain
monitor in
regulatory-
CVP?
CVP trends.
Yeah, good.
like-
Good. Usually the CVP as a single data will not give you any inference about the fluid status. It is the trend in CVP that you have to go about. Or else, if better monitors, what are the better monitors if it is available?
Pulse pressure variation, stroke volume variation, dynamic
that one-
indicators, like cardiac
Dynamic
output
indicators.
monitoring.
Yeah, those are the better monitors. If you have that, it is the best thing to monitor is fluid output, fluid status of the patient. What are the fluids you select?
Balanced salt solution, ringer
Balanced salt
lactate or plasmolite. If the
You are not bothered
potassium,
about potassium.
if the
If the
potassium
potassium
is
is
less than 5.5,
good. And what about the normal saline? What is your concern about normal saline?
we can use normal saline, but it will cause hyperchloremic metabolic acidosis in this patient. So,
Yeah, you cannot use too much also. Not more than a liter or so. Okay. And what about colloids?
colloids are usually not advised in chronic kidney disease patients. They can precipitate proteinuria and can worsen the renal injury further.
Yeah, more than the proteinuria, what happens is the higher molecular
They have higher molecular weight and they will cause
pulmonary.
tubular.
No, they have a tendency to seep into the pulmonary leaky capillaries, and
Okay.
it produces more of a pulmonary congestion. So all fluids, say if you give too much, it will go into the pulmonary capillaries in this patient.
Okay.
So you better to give crystalloids, which are easily absorbed and easily let out. You can take out with dialysis. Colloids will cause more osmotic problems in this patient. And if little amount of GFR is preserved in this patient, that will also get damaged sometimes. So colloids are ideally avoided in patients with CKD or with a little bit of GFR is there. Okay. Then yes, you have told about the monitoring. Okay, now what
And
are
I
the
will also preserve the AV fistula by adequate padding and avoid non-invasive blood pressure and IV line on the side of the fistula.
fistula? Yes. Then how is the okay? Now what are the type of anesthesia you will like to give in this patient?
After weighing the risk benefit of coagulation profile and platelets, I prefer neuraxial anesthesia in this patient.
Yeah. Usually these patients with CKDs, their coagulation problem will be much settled if they are properly dialyzed.
Yes.
And if they are regularly dialyzed and their urea levels are regularly maintained, they will not have much of bleeding tendency. And if they are very much on their erythropoietin and if their hemoglobin is maintained, mostly their coagulopathies will be in the normal range. So you can go for a neuraxial blockade. What neuraxial blockade you will go?
Spinal anesthesia.
What are the concerns about spinal anesthesia in this patient?
Due to acidemia and hyperkalemia, there will be altered protein binding of the local anesthetics. So the local anesthetic free fraction will be increased and more prone for local anesthesia systemic toxicity. So we have to reduce the dose of local anesthetic to 25%.
Yeah, but that is not with spinal. That is maybe with the epidural. With spinal, what is the concern for you?
Mainly coagulation abnormality will cause the spinal.
You told something about autonomic neuropathy.
They will have exaggerated hypotension.
Yeah, good.
Spinal.
These people will be exaggerated. They will have hypotension and they cannot even resuscitate them after spinal. So you may have to use some noradrenaline or something to keep their the pressures higher side. So that is one thing. When you are talking about epidural, if you're going for epidural, you have hypotension can be minimized by giving a threaded epidural or segmental epidural or whatever it is. But you will have to gauge the amount of local anesthetic you are giving, because in small amount it may produce a toxic effect because of protein bounding. And more than that is your pKa of the drug is 8.1 for senzacaine.
Ionized form will be
yeah, more, but the pH of these patients will be more on the acidic side. So the drug may take a longer time to act, or it may not act for some time. So that concerns our anesthetic technique also. So when you are giving a epidural or a regional block, you should go very carefully on the dosing of these drugs. Okay. Okay, this patient has got a coagulopathy. Say INR is 1.8 or something. So going for a GA. What is your anesthetic drugs, or what is your way of giving GA in this patient?
I will induce the patient with fentanyl 100 mics, propofol.
No. Okay, what are the drugs you will select?
Propofol, fentanyl, and succinylcholine for rapid sequence injection, and atracurium.
Okay. What if you have been given propofol, etomidate, and ketamine? Which one will you select?
Propofol, sir.
Okay. Why not thiopentone?
Thiopentone has more of protein binding. So due to albuminemia, the free fraction of the drug will be increased. So it will get accumulated, and the patient will have.
You have to dose you can use whatever
Dose
drug
reduction
you want.
is advised in CKD patient.
Yes, whatever drug you want, you can use, provided you should be cautious on their pharmacokinetics. That will happen in these patients. Okay. What about to ketamine? Ketamine is wonderful drug. We can't use it in these patients.
If they have associated hypertension, we cannot use ketamine.
Yeah. Otherwise,
we can use them.
Yes. Only problem is the delirium. We don't know why the patient is going for delirium post-operatively, whether it is because of the uremia or because of our drug. Okay. And propofol, what is the concerns when you are using propofol?
Hypotension.
Yes. If you give too rapidly, and if you give
slow induction is preferred in CKD to avoid hypotension.
What about etomidate?
Etomidate, we can use it.
Yes, we can use if there is a cardiac disease involving this patient. If there is a CKD, CHP. What is cardiorenal syndrome? I wanted to ask you before. What is cardiorenal syndrome?
There are 5 types in cardiorenal syndrome. In first two, the renal, due to cardiac abnormality, they will prone for kidney disease.
It's very simple actually. First thing is acute kidney injury producing acute heart failure producing acute kidney injury. Then chronic heart failure producing chronic kidney injury. That is first. Next is acute kidney injury producing acute heart failure, and chronic kidney disease producing chronic heart failure. It is the reverse of that. Okay. First is by heart producing kidney disease. Second is the kidney producing the heart disease. First two is the heart failure producing kidney disease. And second two is kidney disease producing the heart failure. Heart disease. So last one is producing both the failure.
Secondary diseases producing both cardiac and renal.
Both the cardiac and like sepsis and diabetes. This is the cardiorenal syndrome. Okay. What about this etomidate? Like etomidate, if the patient is having IHP with colorectal disease or anything else, LV dysfunction, definitely it will be better, and you can use etomidate. Now, what are the next opioids? What you are telling us? Why are you bothered about using only fentanyl? Why not about morphine? Why not
morphine and meperidine? They has active metabolites which get excreted by kidney. So they may have more prone for post-operative respiratory depression. So dose reduction is advised in kidney disease patients. And meperidine, the metabolite is epileptogenic, so it can increase the seizure.
Okay. And what relaxant you call? Succinylcholine. 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 What is your concern?
Succinylcholine, it can cause hyperkalemia For the intubating dose of 1 mg per kg, there will be rise of 0.5 milliequivalents per liter. If the
Okay.
patient is having hyperkalemia,
More than 5.5,
more
you
than
should
5,
not use phenylcholine. If it's more than 5.5, what are the other drugs that you will use?
rocuronium.
Or is the dose you will use?
For rapid sequence induction, I prefer 1.2 mg per kg, 60 seconds.
Okay. All these patients are considered to be a full stomach patient, and you have to use only RSI. Okay. And what is the elimination time for rocuronium? If you use 1.2 milligram and the surgery finishes within half an hour, how long will you have to wait? These
The
patients.
elimination time actually it is prolonged in CKD patients.
Okay.
More than
It will be more than 1.5 hours for
1.5 hours.
in rocuronium, that intubating dose with 1.2 milligram. You have to wait for at least 1.5 hours for extubation. And now coming to what other drugs you can use? Atracurium you told. And what about cisatracurium? What is the dose of cisatracurium?
0.1 mg per kg intubating dose I can use.
Yeah. What is the advantage of cisatracurium in this case?
They undergo Hoffman's elimination. So they are non-renal dependent elimination and they are also short acting.
So, with atracurium or cisatracurium, which one will you prefer?
Cisatracurium. Atracurium, the metabolite laudanocin, if it gets accumulated, it is epileptogenic, which is excreted via kidney.
And before coming for like what other things you will see? What other drugs?
Inhalation agents, I
Yeah.
will use
Yeah.
isoflurane for maintenance.
Why
Sevoflurane,
not sevoflurane?
when used in low flows, it can cause nephrotoxicity due to fluoride formation or compound A formation.
Okay. All those things are all theoretical, and there is no still data proving that. Okay. And but what is the FDA recommendation for that? What is the FDA recommendation for using sevoflurane in renal failure patients? It's 1 liter flow of more than 1 hour. If you are going to give anesthesia for more than 1 hour, you have to use flow of 2 liters.
Okay.
That is how they have recommended. But fluoride toxicity or compound A formation are all theoretical for sevoflurane, and still a lot of patients are being done sevoflurane. Okay. And what about desflurane?
Sir?
What about desflurane?
Desflurane is the ideal agent of choice
Yes.
in kidney disease patient, but it is costly, so we are not using it.
Okay. Now, the patient has been induced and you have intubated, and you have given fluids, you have maintained the fluids, everything, and there is a sudden fall in blood pressure after induction. What will be your drug of choice for treatment in this patient?
Vasopressin.
What? Vasopressor.
Vasopressin is the first
Yeah.
choice.
Yeah. What vasopressor will you use?
Noradrenaline.
Yeah, good. Noradrenaline. And you have to keep less. Will you keep this patient on the wet side or the dry side of the board on the fluid management? Will you keep them?
Depending on the type of surgery, we advise the patient to keep on wet side or dry side of the surgery, and also on the pre-op status of the patient.
Yeah, good. Pre-op, this patient is dialyzed the same morning. Yesterday
They
patient
will be more volume depleted, so I will try
Good.
to keep the patient on the wet side of the patient.
Okay.
If they are volume overloaded and not dialyzed the before day, I will try to keep the patient on the dry side of the patient.
Good. Excellent. Okay. Now surgery is over in 1.5 hours. Then how will you go about extubating this patient? What are the things we will do for extubating? How will you ventilate this patient? How will you ventilate this patient on the intraoperative functions.
Protective
Intraoperative
lung ventilation strategy is preferred. Low tidal volume with PEEP,
minimal PEEP.
minimal
So it should
PEEP,
not be too
less
much.
than
Minimal
5.
PEEP. Yeah. 5 millimeters is okay. And lung protective strategy ventilation, the low tidal volume. Why? Because why do you want the lung?
Their alveoli is distended and they are more prone for atelectasis and also interstitial edema. Their AA gradient will be increased
Yes.
to improve.
AA gradient. Hello, I'm not able to hear you.
AA gradient will be increased in this patient.
Yes, because of the lung water. What will be happening is the lung water will be increasing, and so the oxygenation will not be diffusing across the alveolar capillary membrane. More than that is the alveolar capillary membrane will not have surfactant, they'll all be collapsed. And if you try to, they'll have all sorts of hypoxemic episodes, and they will have, when you try to treat this hypoxemia with high PEEP, they'll have alveolar damage. Alveolar ventilator injury, lung injury can happen in this patient. So you have to give lung protective ventilation, and you have to monitor the CO2 and oxygenation regularly. Okay, and okay, you have now ventilated and you wanted to extubate this patient. Okay, how will you go about extubating this patient? You feel that patient is having a moderate amount of fluid overload, and you can see some desaturation on the screen, say 92, 93. And when you auscultate the lungs, you feel little.
Patient is in pulmonary edema.
Yeah.
I will auscultate and then see if any CRUBS is present. I will give 100% oxygen and then give furosemide 40 to 80 mg.
This patient is not causing urine. She's on dialysis.
I will arrange for immediate dialysis in the post-op.
Good. You have to go for post-op dialysis.
We can also do a bedside lung ultrasound to confirm the pulmonary edema.
Confirm the, yeah, good. What are the lung ultrasound parameters to see that patient is having volume overload to the lung?
Curly A, curly B lines. If there are more
curly
than
B lines.
Curly B lines. Curly B lines more than 3 is significant in pulmonary edema.
Yes, in one segment. Okay, that's about big criteria is there regarding the curly B lines. And you send this patient with on the tube with ventilation. You can send them for a dialysis, and once they dialysis, you can extubate them. And if you feel that patient is on the dry side, anyhow, you can extubate them out. So what will you do for extubation?
I will take neostigmine 50 mics per kg.
Okay. How will? Yeah. What is the duration of action of neostigmine?
The duration, the half-life is prolonged in kidney disease patients.
So your recurization is not a problem here. Okay.
Yeah, recurization is a not problem due to the prolonged action of neostigmine.
Okay. Then what else is your and what will be your post-operative analgesia and other things?
I prefer short-acting IV opioids of fentanyl boluses and multimodal analgesia.
Like
paracetamol.
What is the dose of paracetamol adjusted in these patients?
Paracetamol duration should be increased based on the status of the GFR.
Yeah.
If the GFR is reduced, we should give advice only 4th hourly. Normal GFR 4th hourly. If there is reduction in 50%, 6th hourly. More than 50%, 8th hourly paracetamol can be given.
Yeah. Tramadol can be given. What is the problem with tramadol?
The metabolite of tramadol can accumulate in the kidney. So extended release tramadol is avoided in kidney disease patients.
Okay. And usually when you are reversing this patient, I expect you to tell the neuromuscular blocking. when you are doing a reversal, you should have confirmed with the neuromuscular block hand that the patient is out of relaxation. Because any drug, if you had used rocuronium, definitely it's going to be acting longer. Atracurium or whatever it is, still you have to use a neuromuscular blockade to see whether you can give a reversal or not. And okay, Vijay Kumar, if there is any, we can ask about some basics like anatomy and physiology, anything you can come across. What are the nerves, blood supply, or what is the countercurrent mechanism? All those things are physiological. Then you can go ahead.
Yeah, most of the things we discussed. I just wanted to make a few comments. One thing, in your examination, you have not examined the limb part. So actually, the patient is for fracture femur, and you have not examined about the limb. So you need to tell something about the limb. Okay. Yeah, that is one. In the current scenario, you have to tell about the COVID infection, whether the patient had any COVID infection or not, because that will alter so many things. How before they got COVID infection, if at all they had. Okay, so how long usually emergency is okay. Elective, what is the recommendation?
For elective, if it is a severe COVID disease, more than 12 weeks.
Yeah, that is 3 months is the recommended period after COVID infection. Any elective surgery can be taken up. Emergency is totally different. And that is what I just wanted to add. And all these CKD patients has osteosclerosis and osteomalacia, and so they are more prone for fractures. Yeah. So that is the reason most of this patient, CKD patients, comes for surgery. Okay. Then I just wanted to ask you, what are the causes of anemia in CKD patient? Because all our anesthesia part is usually concerned about blood, respiratory system, cardiovascular system mainly. Okay, so what are the causes of anemia in CKD patients?
One is decreased erythropoietin production.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
Then dietary deficiency.
Yeah, good.
And chronic upper GI losses due to uremia.
Yeah, good.
And reduced lifespan of RBC by uremic.
Yeah, very good. So these are some of the causes of anemia in CKD patients. Okay, so why do these CKD patients have high tendency for bleeding during surgery?
Due to qualitative dysfunction of the platelets.
The platelets, yeah.
So there will be impaired adhesiveness and aggregation of the platelets due to impaired release of 1 Willebrand factor and factor A.
Yeah.
And one thing, Vijay Kumar, regarding when this patient comes for IV line, where will you put the IV line?
In the on the hand where the fistula is not present, on the non-dominant hand.
Okay. You want to put a central line. Where will you put?
On the opposite side of the fistula.
Fistula. Why you should not put on the fistula side? Because whatever reading you get will be totally wrong, and you cannot get the correct values. And you should not, even subclavian, you should not pierce on the fistula hand. And whenever you wanted to monitor this patient, any invasive arterial monitoring should be judiciously used. It should not be used just for seeing, because every arteries are important. Patient may have a fistula. This can block, and you have to put another fistula on the other hand. So you should never use the artery in this patient like routinely. Most of the time, they will have multiple fistulas. If they have two fistulas, say both sides, one is working, other is not working, where will you put the central line?
In the femoral line.
No, you can use the vein that is the line which is not functioning. The non-functioning fistula side, you can use the central line. Okay. These are a few tricks which was discussed in the PG seminar. Okay, with on the webinar. So these are the some questions which I got it from big people who have been taking this webinar. Okay. And regarding the epidural, okay. For how much the dose you told that you will reduce for these patients?
25% reduction in the dose of bupivacaine is advised.
Oh, okay. You have to reduce the dose. And what is the what will be the effect you will see? Like if you reduce the dose, your levels will be high, or will you get the adequate height, or what will happen? What will be the spread of epidural in these patients?
The spread of epidural will be delayed in CKD patients.
Yeah. It will be delayed and it will not be complete also sometimes. They will have a lot of patchy epidural, and sometimes if you give it may be prolonged, very erotic behavior will be there in this patient. Okay.
And we were discussing about compound A of sevoflurane.
Yeah.
Actually, yes, as Dr. Muthukumar was telling, it is more of theoretical, but in the exam point of view, you should know something about the compound A. The ASA recommendation is you should use a fresh gas flow of more than 2 liters when you use
more than 2 hours. If you told that.
So
more than 1 hour of surgery.
Yeah, if limiting the exposure of sevoflurane less than 2 hours if fresh gas flows are between 1 and 2 liters. And fresh gas flow less than 1 liter is not recommended. That is what the guideline says. That is for exam point of view. So if less than 1 liter is not recommended at all. Between 1 and 2 liters, if we use fresh gas flow, then sevoflurane has to be used less than 2 hours. And if it is prolonged, you have to use fresh gas flow more than 2 liters. Okay, you get it?
Yes.
Yeah. Then what are the care of the AV fistula you have to do during surgery, whether it is regional or GA? What are the care you will take to prevent the AV fistula?
Pad and protect the
AV good. Fistula. Yeah, good.
And I will frequently check whether thrill is present and the patency of the fistula.
Yeah. So to frequently check, you should not tuck the AV fistula inside this thing. So it has to be kept outside to check it. Okay. Then hyperextension should not be there. You should avoid hypotension. And BP cuff, if you use NABP, you should not use on the same side of the fistula. Yeah. Then what are the anesthetic goals for the patient who has CKD?
To avoid hypotension, hypovolemia, and hypoxia intraop, to maintain the renal perfusion pressure.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
Renoprotective strategies.
So these are the renoprotective strategies what you told. Then you should maintain a good hydration. You should not go for hypovolemia. Then acid base has to be maintained. If it is a prolonged this thing, you should be very careful about sodium and potassium particularly. And because it is an ortho case, that there could be chance of blood loss, and you should maintain the hematocrit more than 25%. And since this patient is a diabetic, you should have a good control of blood sugar as well. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Coming to
Yes.
dialysis, see what will happen if the patient is coming for an emergency. Now, say patient has acute abdomen, and the patient comes with acute abdomen for a CKD patient, and you have no time to dialysis, what will you do?
Introp hemodialysis.
Yeah, intraop hemodialysis is recommended only in cardiac patients.
Okay.
All these patients, you can medically manage these patients intraoperatively. What most important thing is the volume status and the potassium. So you can have a lesser volume, giving less volume, and manage the potassium medically. And immediately after the surgery, you can send them for dialysis. Intraoperative dialysis is another choice if the patient is having a cardiac surgery. Recent recommendation tells only cardiac surgery as the intraoperative dialysis is recommended only in cardiac surgery with CKD. Okay. And what is the minimal time? Minimal time will you allot for taking up the patient after dialysis?
4 to 6 hours.
No, it's even 2 hours. Within 2 hours, you can take up. That is, if your heparinization is not done, if they have not heparinized on dialysis, you can take up within 2 hours. That is the least time that is recommended. If they have heparinized, it is 6 hours, 4 to 6 hours.
Okay.
What are the regional anesthetic implication? Because you selected subarachnoid block, what is the regional anesthetic implication in the CKD patients?
It minimizes the blood loss and
what are the concerns you will correct before selecting regional anesthesia? For example, timing of the dialysis, as Dr. Muthukumar was telling, it is heparin or heparin-free dialysis. Okay, so if it is with the heparin, you should wait for 4 to 6 hours, as you told. If it is heparin-free, you can do it in 2 hours. That is one. Okay. Then they have about the coagulation profile, and for your case, all the coagulation profile is normal, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So because it is a 2 years CKD patient, they are more prone for bone problem. So you should be very careful in positioning the patient. Okay. So in the fracture table, if you extend too much, they will go in for another side fracture as well. Okay. Then you should rule out any spine fractures. And of course, the sympathetic blockade will have a high drop in blood pressure. So these are the anesthetic implication, regional anesthesia in CKD patients. Okay. So what is the role of colloids in CKD patients? Will you use colloid in whether it is regional or GA patients?
Colloids are avoided in CKD patients. They can accumulate and worsen the further renal injury.
Yeah. So actually, recently the penta and tetra starch has a minimal influence on kidney and hemostasis. So that has been advised even in CKD patients, and particularly if they are on dialysis, then we can use. Better to be avoided. Better to use the balanced salt solution. Okay.
Now for exam purpose, they say it's better to avoid.
Yeah, better to avoid
colloid. Because colloids. These are all only recently they have come up with colloid studies, but initially what they were telling, colloids to be avoided in any education. Example.
And about the reversal, you were telling about recorarization because of use of neostigmin. Actually, because the neostigmin, the action is prolonged, they will have parasympathetic response. So you should use glycopyrrolate, which has a longer half-life to avoid bradycardia or AV fistula. AV block.
Okay.
So I think we have covered most about the kidney diseases for non-cardiac surgery, non-renal surgeries. So anything more? Anyone has any questions? They can put it in the chat box. And last week we missed out, and next week we'll be having a lecture by Dr. Viveka. She is the transfusion specialist in KG Hospital. She'll be talking about blood grouping, the recent advances in the blood grouping, massive blood transfusion, and the associated complication, autologous blood transfusion. Then what are the anesthetic concerns during blood transfusion? So we'll, if time permits, we'll see about normovolemic hemodilution. These are some of the questions most frequently asked in theory. And in practical also, they will be asking about massive blood transfusion and associated complication. So that is about next week class. And the following class will be seeing about diabetes, only about diabetes management in the perioperative period. So we'll see a simple case and a diabetic case. Then we'll discuss only about diabetes. That is the next 2 weeks session. So any doubts anyone has? And that's a good discussion by Dr. Anbumani and Dr. Muthukumar. Yeah. If nothing is there, we can wind up. And any questions anyone has, you can put it in the group and we can discuss. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Prabha. And thank you, Dr. Muthukumar, for spending your valuable time in the evening. Actually, this is a good topic. CKD patients for non-renal surgeries. Of course, in the future, we'll be seeing about anesthesia for transplantation also, because that is one of the frequently asked questions in theory as well as in the practicals.
Yeah.
So, for nothing is there, shall we wind up, sir?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Thank you. Good night. We'll see you next week with the blood transfusion session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.